in ordinary life makes it to be quite out of the question that a man shall be uncivil to a woman. He had escaped from conventional usage into rough, truthful speech, under stress from the extremity of the hardship to which he had been subjected. And the women understood it, and appreciated it, and liked it rather than otherwise. To Lizzie it seemed fitting that a Corsair so circumstanced should be as uncivil as he pleased, and Mrs. Carbuncle had long been accustomed to her friend's moods. "They can't really think it," said Mrs. Carbuncle. "Somebody thinks it. I am told that your particular friend Lord Fawn," this he said, specially addressing Lizzie, "has expressed a strong opinion that I carry about the necklace always in my pocket. I trust to have the opportunity of wringing his neck some day." "I do so wish you would," said Lizzie. "I shall not lose a chance if I can get it. Before all this occurred I should have said of myself that nothing of the kind could put me out. I don't think there is a man in the world cares less what people say of him than I do. I am as indifferent to ordinary tittle-tattle as a rhinoceros. But, by George, when it comes to stealing £10,000 worth of diamonds, and the delicate attentions of all the metropolitan police, one begins to feel that one is vulnerable. When I get up in the morning I half feel that I shall be locked up before night, and I can see in the eyes of every man I meet that he takes me for the prince of burglars." "And it is all my fault," said Lizzie. "I wish the diamonds had been thrown into the sea," said Mrs. Carbuncle. "What do you think about them yourself?" asked Lucinda. "I don't know what to think. I'm at a dead loss. You know that man, Mr. Benjamin, Lady Eustace?" Lizzie, with a little start, answered that she did, that she had had dealings with him before her marriage, and had once owed him £200 or £300. As the man's name had been mentioned, she thought it better to own as much. "So he tells me. Now in all London I don't suppose there is a greater rascal than Benjamin." "I didn't know that," said Lizzie. "But I did. And with that rascal I have had money dealings for the last 6 or 7 years. He has cashed bills for me, and has my name to bills now, and Sir Griffin's too. I'm half inclined to think that he has got the diamonds." "Do you indeed?" said Mrs. Carbuncle. "Mr. Benjamin!" said Lizzie. "And he returns the compliment." "How does he return it?" asked Mrs. Carbuncle. "He either thinks that I've got him, or he wants to make me believe that he thinks so. He hasn't dared to say it, but that's his intention. Such an opinion from such a man on such a subject would be quite a compliment, and I feel it. But yet it troubles me. You know that greasy Israelitish smile of his, Lady Eustace?" Lizzie nodded her head and tried to smile. "When I asked him yesterday about the diamonds, he leered at me and rubbed his hands. 'It's a pretty little game, ain't it, Lord George?' he said. I told him that I thought it a very bad game, and that I hoped the police would have the thief and the necklace soon. It's been managed a deal too well for that, Lord George, don't you think so?" Lord George mimicked the Jew as he repeated the words, and the ladies of course laughed. But poor Lizzie's attempt at laughter was very sorry. I told him to his face that I thought he had them among his treasures. "No, no, no, Lord George," he said, and seemed quite to enjoy the joke. "If he's got them himself, he can't think that I have them. But if he has not, I don't doubt but he believes that I have. And I'll tell you another person who suspects me." "What fools they are!" said Lizzie. "I don't know how that may be. Sir Griffin, Lucinda, isn't at all sure but what I have them in my pocket." "I can believe anything of him," said Lucinda. "And it seems he can believe anything of me. I shall begin to think soon that I did take them myself, or at any rate that I ought to have done so. I wonder what you 3 women think of it. If you do think I've got 'em, don't scruple to say so. I'm quite used to it, and it won't hurt me any further." The ladies again laughed. "You must have your suspicions," continued he. "I suppose some of the London thieves did get them," said Mrs. Carbuncle. "The police say the box was empty," said Lord George. "How can the police know?" asked Lucinda. "They weren't there to see. Of course the thieves would say that they didn't take them." "What do you think, Lady Eustace?" "I don't know what to think. Perhaps Mr. Camperdown did it." "Or the Lord Chancellor," said Lord George. "One is just as likely as the other. I wish I could get at what you really think. The whole thing would be so complete if all you three suspected me. I can't get out of it all by going to Paris or Kamtchatka, as I should have half a dozen detectives on my heels wherever I went. I must brazen it out here. And the worst of it is, that I feel that a look of guilt is creeping over me. I have a sort of conviction growing upon me that I shall be taken up and tried, and that a jury will find me guilty. I dream about it. And if, as is probable, it drives me mad, I'm sure that I shall accuse myself in my madness. There's a fascination about it that I can't explain or escape. I go on thinking how I would have done it if I did do it. I spent hours in calculating how much I would have realized, and where I would have found my market. I couldn't keep myself from asking Benjamin the other day how much they would be worth to him.
What did he say?
Asked Lizzie, who sat gazing upon the Corsair, and who was now herself fascinated. Lord George was walking about the room, then sitting for a moment in one chair and again in another, and after a while leaning on the mantelpiece. In his speaking he addressed himself almost exclusively to Lizzie, who could not keep her eyes from his. "He grinned greasily," said the Corsair, "and told me they had already been offered to him once before by you." "That's false," said Lizzie. "Very likely. And then he said that no doubt they'd fall into his hands some day. 'Wouldn't it be a game, Lord George,' he said, 'if, after all, they should be no more than paste?' That made me think he had got them, and that he'd get paste diamonds put into the same setting, and then give them up with some story of his own making." "You'd know whether they were paste or not, wouldn't you, Lord George?" he asked. The Corsair, as he repeated Mr. Benjamin's words, imitated the Jew's manner so well that he made Lizzie shudder. "While I was there, a detective named Gager came in." "The same man who came here, perhaps?" suggested Mrs. Carbuncle. "I think not. He seemed to be quite intimate with Mr. Benjamin, and went on at once about the diamonds. Benjamin said that they'd made their way over to Paris, and that he'd heard of them. I found myself getting quite intimate with Mr. Gager, who seemed hardly to scruple at showing that he thought that Benjamin and I were confederates. Mr. Camperdown has offered £400 reward for the jewels, to be paid on their surrender to the hands of Mr. Garnett, the jeweller. Gager declared that, if any ordinary thief had them, they would be given up at once for that sum." "That's true, I suppose," said Mrs. Carbuncle. "How would the ordinary thief get his money without being detected? Who would dare to walk into Garnett's shop with the diamonds in his hands and ask for the £400? Besides, they have been sold to some one, and, as I believe, to my dear friend Mr. Benjamin." "I suppose you ain't a-going anywhere just at present, Lord George?" said that fellow Gager. "What the devil's that to you?" I asked him. He just laughed and shook his head. "I don't doubt but that there's a policeman about waiting till I leave this house, or looking at me now with a magnifying glass from the windows at the other side. They've photographed me while I'm going about, and published a list of every hair on my face in the hue and cry. I dined at the club yesterday and found a strange waiter. I feel certain that he was a policeman done up in livery all for my sake. I turned sharp round in the street yesterday and found a man at a corner. I'm sure that man was watching me, and was looking at my pockets to see whether the jewel case was there. As for myself, I can think of nothing else. I wish I had got them. I should have something then to pay me for all this nuisance." "I do wish you had," said Lizzie. "What I should do with them I cannot even imagine. I'm always thinking of that too, making plans for getting rid of them, supposing I had stolen them. My belief is, that I should be so sick of them that I should chuck them over the bridge into the river, only that I should fear that some policeman's eye would be on me as I did it. My present position is not comfortable, but if I had got them, I think that the weight of them would crush me altogether. Having a handle to my name, and being a lord, or at least called a lord, makes it all the worse. People are so pleased to think that a lord should have stolen a necklace." Lizzie listened to it all with a strange fascination. If this strong man was so much upset by the bare suspicion, what must be her condition? The jewels were in her desk upstairs, and the police had been with her also.